The spaceship Oathbound drifted in the cold darkness of space, its metal skin glowing faintly under distant starlight. Inside, silence ruled. Only the soft hum of engines and the slow heartbeat of the ship filled the void. Among the alien crew members, one human walked the shining corridors, always watched, always whispered about. His name was Ethan Cole. Ethan had joined the Oathbound under the banner of peace. Humanity and the Karath Dominion were not enemies anymore, but they were not friends either. The Karath were tall and elegant beings, skin like silver glass, eyes like liquid fire. They spoke in voices that sounded like wind and thunder. Everything about them seemed graceful, ancient, and untouchable. Ethan had learned to keep his distance. The Karath respected skill, not words. They rarely spoke to him unless they needed repairs done or data checked. He had no friends among them, only duty. Yet he didn't mind. Humanity had always been the youngest species among the stars, and he wanted to prove that humans could stand beside any race as equals. Still, there were rules. Sacred, unbreakable rules. And the most important one was spoken to him the day he came aboard. Never enter the women's chamber. Every Karath ship had a place called the Sanctum of Mothers, a hidden chamber where their females lived, rested, and cared for their young. It was not just a room. It was holy. Even male Karath entered only with permission and ritual. For a human to step inside was an unforgivable act. Ethan never questioned it. He respected their beliefs. He avoided that part of the ship completely, staying busy in his assigned zones. But sometimes, late at night, when the halls were empty, he wondered what lay behind the carved doors of the sanctum. He imagined soft light, strange voices, and life being born in ways humans could never understand. Then one day, everything changed. It began as a faint tremor under his boots. The Oathbound shuddered once, then again, harder. The lights flickered red. An alarm began to scream. Through his earpiece came the voice of the ship's AI. Warning, hull breach detected in Section C9. Atmospheric containment failing. Evacuate immediately. Ethan grabbed his repair kit and sprinted down the corridor. Section C9 was close to the sanctum. His heart pounded as he ran, passing through clouds of smoke and flashing hazard lights. Sparks rained from the ceiling. A smell of burning metal filled the air. When he turned the last corner, he froze. The walls were cracked, the floor half melted by an energy blast. Two Karath guards lay motionless near the entrance of a tall arched door, its glowing runes pulsing weakly. Ethan's eyes widened. It was the door to the women's chamber. For a moment, he stood still, torn between fear and duty. He knew the law. No human could enter, not ever. But then, from behind the door, he heard something. A sound so fragile it broke his hesitation. It was a cry. A child's cry. It came again, soft and frightened. Inside that room, someone was alive. Someone was scared. And the air in the corridor was thinning fast. His suit's oxygen alert started blinking. The emergency barriers were beginning to seal the section off. If he left now, they would be trapped forever. His training screamed at him to stop. His orders demanded he stay out. But the human part of him, the one that couldn't walk away from a cry for help, took control. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the broken door panel and started working. Sparks flew as he forced the mechanism open manually. "Come on," he whispered through gritted teeth. The door gave way with a heavy hiss, releasing a wave of warm, glowing mist. Inside, the light shimmered blue and gold. The air felt alive, almost humming with energy. Ethan stepped inside. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then eyes turned toward him. Dozens of glowing silver eyes filled with shock, fear, and disbelief. The chamber was breathtaking. Walls covered in living crystal, gentle pools of light floating in the air, and several alien women, tall and elegant, clutching small, glowing infants close to their chests. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. He had done the one thing he was never supposed to do. He had entered the sacred chamber. The alien women stared at him, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt smaller than he ever had before. Not because of their height, but because of what he had just broken. And yet, amid their fear, he saw something else. One of them, trembling and pale, was bleeding, her child crying weakly beside her. Ethan took a slow step forward. He didn't know what to say, what to do, but his heart told him one thing. They needed help, and he couldn't walk away. Ethan stood frozen in the glowing mist, his heart pounding so loudly he could hear it echo inside his helmet. The alien women stared at him in stunned silence. Their skin shimmered like silver glass, their eyes glowing softly with blue and gold light. They were beautiful, but terrifying too, not because of their power, but because of what this moment meant. He had broken the sacred rule. Every instinct told him to step back, to apologize, to run, but then the sound came again, the small, weak cry of a child. His gaze turned to one corner of the room where a Karath woman lay against the crystal wall, clutching her baby close. Her breathing was rough, shallow. Dark blue fluid leaked from a wound on her shoulder, staining the glowing floor. Without thinking, Ethan moved toward her. The other women hissed softly, their markings flashing red in warning. One of them, taller and older, stepped forward and raised her hand. Ethan froze in place again, raising both hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I just want to help her." The Karath language hummed through the air, low and sharp. He didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. "You should not be here." Still, Ethan looked past the fear in their eyes and focused on the mother and her child. Her skin was losing its glow fast. The baby in her arms whimpered weakly, a tiny light flickering around its head. Ethan's heart tightened. That was life fading away before his eyes. He took a slow breath and pointed at his toolkit. "I'm a medic engineer. I can stop the bleeding." He didn't know if they understood, but he had to try. He took one small step closer. The elder woman stared at him for a long moment, her eyes like twin suns. And then slowly she lowered her hand. That was permission enough. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the injured mother. Her breath came in uneven gasps. He tore open a medical patch from his suit and pressed it over her wound. The nanogel spread instantly, sealing the bleeding spot with a soft silver layer. She winced but didn't pull away. He spoke gently, even though she couldn't understand. "You're going to be okay. Just hold on." The child reached out toward him, tiny trembling fingers glowing faintly blue. Ethan hesitated, then carefully let the child grasp one of his fingers. It felt warm, alive, fragile. In that small touch, something passed between them, a spark of trust. For a long moment, the room was silent except for their breathing. The elder woman stepped closer, her expression unreadable. She looked down at Ethan's work, then at the saved mother whose breathing had steadied slightly. Slowly, her markings shifted from red to calm gold. She knelt beside him and said in slow, broken English, "Human, you help?" Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, help." Her gaze softened. She turned to the others and spoke in their native tongue, her voice low and melodic. The tension in the chamber slowly faded. The other women lowered their arms. One even stepped forward to help him secure the injured mother with glowing fabric strips. The ship shook again. Another explosion somewhere far above them. The walls flickered. Ethan looked up as the emergency lights turned red once more. "We need to move," he said quickly. "This section is unstable." The elder woman tilted her head, then seemed to understand. She barked an order to the others. Two of them lifted the weakened mother gently, and one carried the child. Ethan moved toward the exit panel, but when he tried to open it, it didn't respond. The system had locked down completely. He cursed under his breath. "We're sealed in." The elder woman stepped beside him, her glowing hands brushing over the control runes. But even she couldn't open it. She looked at him, frustration and fear mixing in her eyes. Ethan stared at the sealed door, then at the frightened faces around him. For the first time, he truly saw them. Not as mysterious aliens, not as forbidden beings, but as mothers, as people terrified for their children. He clenched his fists. "All right," he muttered to himself. "If the ship won't open it, I'll find another way." He knelt down, opening his repair kit again. Sparks flew as he rewired the manual controls. The chamber's glowing mist reflected off his visor, lighting up his determined eyes. Behind him, the alien women watched in silence, no longer hostile but uncertain, waiting. Minutes passed. Sweat dripped down his forehead. The controls sparked, and then, finally, the panel flickered green. The door began to slide open slowly, letting in a gust of cold air. Ethan exhaled in relief. "There we go." The elder woman turned to him again. Her glowing eyes met his, full of gratitude and disbelief. For a moment, no words were needed. A human had entered the forbidden chamber, and instead of bringing dishonor, he had brought life. But as they prepared to leave, a deep metallic groan echoed through the walls. Something heavy had broken loose above them. Ethan looked up. His relief vanished. Something wasn't over yet. The air in the chamber grew tense. A deep metallic sound echoed through the ship, followed by a long groan that vibrated under their feet. The floor trembled as if the Oathbound itself was crying out in pain. Ethan looked up and saw cracks spreading through the crystal ceiling. The alien women gasped in fear. The elder one shouted something sharp in her native tongue, and the others gathered around the injured mother and her child. The soft blue mist in the chamber turned darker, disturbed by the shaking. Ethan ran toward the main control panel near the door. His fingers flew over the switches, but most systems were dead. The ship's AI was shutting down damaged sections to contain the breach. That meant this part of the ship would soon lose air completely. Damn it, Ethan muttered under his breath. They're sealing us in. The elder woman came to his side, her golden eyes glowing brighter with panic. She spoke fast, but he couldn't understand her words. Still, fear is a universal language. He looked back at her and nodded. I know, we have to get out. I'll find a way. She stared at him for a moment, then gently touched his arm as if trusting him to lead. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. There had to be another exit, an emergency duct or maintenance tunnel. He scanned the walls, remembering the ship's layout from his training. Then he spotted it, a small maintenance hatch behind a glowing crystal pillar. There, he shouted, pointing. That's our way out. He ran to it and tried to open the hatch. The controls were unresponsive, locked by the main system. So he pulled out his plasma cutter. Sparks burst as he forced the metal apart. Behind him, the ship shook again, harder this time. The floor cracked and a piece of the ceiling fell, smashing into the ground. The alien women screamed. Ethan turned around and saw one of them pinned under a fallen shard of crystal. Without thinking, he dropped the cutter and ran to her. Hold on, he yelled. He braced his shoulder under the heavy piece and pushed with all his strength. The crystal didn't move at first. His arms shook, muscles burning. The woman cried in pain. Ethan gritted his teeth. Come on, now move. With one final heave, the shard rolled to the side. The alien woman gasped and crawled free. Her glowing eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, half in shock, half in gratitude. He smiled weakly. You're okay. Go get the others ready. The elder woman shouted orders, helping the injured mother and her child move closer to the hatch. Ethan returned to it, slicing the last bit of metal until it finally broke open. Behind it was a narrow tunnel leading upward, flickering with emergency lights. This way, Ethan said, waving them forward. The elder woman climbed first, carrying the weak mother's child. Two others followed, helping each other through the narrow space. Ethan stayed behind to make sure everyone got through safely. But just as the last one entered, another explosion ripped through the ship. The entire chamber tilted and fire burst from the far side. A massive beam fell from the ceiling, striking the floor near him. The shockwave threw Ethan backward, slamming him into the wall. Pain shot through his ribs. His vision blurred. For a moment he couldn't move. Human, he heard someone cry out. The elder woman had climbed halfway back down, reaching toward him. Ethan blinked hard, trying to stay conscious. He saw the beam blocking his path, flames creeping closer. He knew he wouldn't have time to climb if he freed the beam first, but if he didn't, they couldn't seal the hatch behind them. The fire would follow. He looked up at her, her golden eyes full of desperation, and forced a small smile. Go, he said quietly. She shook her head, shouting something he couldn't understand, but he understood the emotion. It was refusal. She didn't want to leave him. Ethan dragged himself toward the control panel beside the hatch. His fingers trembled as he rewired the system, bypassing the lock. The flames were almost at his legs now, the heat unbearable. Go, he shouted this time, louder. Take them and go. Finally, she understood. Tears shimmered in her glowing eyes as she climbed back up. The last thing Ethan saw before sealing the hatch was the child's small blue light disappearing into the tunnel above. He pressed the emergency override. The hatch closed with a heavy clang. The air in the chamber turned thick with smoke. He fell back coughing, his lungs burning, but as the world started to fade, he smiled faintly. At least they were safe. That was what mattered. He closed his eyes, the sound of fire and distant alarms fading into silence. Far above in the narrow tunnel, the elder woman held the child close. A single tear of silver light rolled down her cheek as she looked back at the sealed hatch. She whispered a word in her language, a word that meant honor. And for the first time in Karath history, A human's name would be spoken in the chamber of Mother's smoke, curled through the shattered corridors of the Oathbound. The once proud ship drifted helplessly in space, its engines flickering like dying stars. Deep inside its wounded hull, emergency drones floated silently, searching for any signs of life. Hours had passed since the explosion in the lower decks. The ship's AI had sealed multiple sections to prevent total destruction. Most of the crew had been rescued, but one human engineer was missing: Ethan Cole. The Karath captain, Varen Sol, stood before the main holographic display, his silver eyes glowing dim with grief and anger. "He entered the sanctum," Varen said quietly. His voice carried both disbelief and sorrow. "No human has ever done such a thing." The elder woman, who had survived with the others through the maintenance tunnel, stood before him. Her name was Sarai, High Mother of the Sanctum. Her once bright markings were dull now, her expression heavy with memory. "Yes," she said softly. "He entered and saved us." The crew around them stirred uncomfortably. A male Karath guard spoke, his tone cold. "That act was forbidden. It cannot be forgiven, no matter the reason." Sarai turned her eyes toward him, her gaze fierce. "He broke our rule," she said, "but he kept our children alive when your guards could not." Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with emotion. "Does your law outweigh life itself?" The room fell silent. Even Captain Varen lowered his head. After a moment, he spoke again. "Search the lower deck," he ordered. "Bring back what you can find of him." Down below, amid twisted metal and flickering light, the drones moved through the ruins of the forbidden chamber. Ash floated in the air like snow. The once beautiful walls of crystal were cracked and burned, their light fading. Then, through the smoke, one of the drones found movement, a faint heartbeat. Beneath a collapsed beam lay Ethan Cole, barely breathing. His suit was torn, his face covered in soot, but he was alive. The drone's sensors blinked green. Life sign detected. Minutes later, a rescue team arrived. The Karath soldiers carefully lifted the beam and carried the unconscious human out. His chest rose and fell weakly, each breath a struggle. When they brought him to the med bay, Sarai was already waiting. She stepped forward the moment she saw his broken body. For the first time in her long life, she felt something she had never known. A strange ache in her chest, a mix of sorrow and admiration for a being so fragile yet so brave. The medics worked in silence. Machines hummed. Ethan's pulse flickered weakly on the monitor. Sarai approached and knelt beside him. She placed her glowing hand gently on his forehead. Her light shimmered softly over his skin. The other Karath watched in awe. No High Mother had ever touched a human before. "He burns like us," she whispered. "He breathes like us, he bleeds. And still he saved us." The room grew silent except for the hum of the machines. Hours passed. The medics stabilized him. He lived, but barely. His body was weak, his lungs damaged by the smoke, his mind drifting between dreams and memories. When Ethan finally opened his eyes, everything looked blurry. The bright silver light above him hurt his eyes. He tried to move, but pain shot through his body. Then he saw her, the tall alien woman with golden eyes, standing beside his bed. "You," he whispered weakly. "You're safe?" Sarai nodded slowly. Her voice was soft, almost human. "Yes, because of you." He smiled faintly, his lips cracked. "Good. Then it was worth it." She stared at him in silence, her heart heavy. The Karath believed that touching a human brought dishonor to a High Mother. But in that moment, she didn't care. She reached out and held his hand gently, her silver fingers glowing faintly against his rough human skin. The warmth surprised her, so alive, so fragile. "Rest now, Ethan Cole," she said quietly. "Your courage is known, you are honored." He tried to answer, but his strength faded. His eyes closed again, a peaceful look on his face. Later, Captain Varen came to the med bay. He stood beside Sarai, watching the sleeping human. "What will happen to him?" she asked softly. Varen's voice was calm. "When he wakes, he will face judgment. The law must be spoken." Sarai turned to him sharply. "Law?" Her voice trembled with anger. "He risked his life to save ours. Would you punish the only soul who showed true honor?" Varen said nothing. He looked at Ethan and then at the High Mother. "Our ways are old," he said finally. "But perhaps it is time they change." Sarai looked down at the human who had broken the sacred rule and saved them all. For the first time, she understood that bravery had no species. It lived in the heart, she whispered again, almost to herself. He entered our chamber not to defy us, but to protect us. That is not sin. That is grace. And from that moment, a quiet storm began within the Karath. The act of one fragile human had shaken the foundation of an ancient belief, and soon the stars themselves would know his name. Ethan woke to the sound of quiet voices. The room was dim, filled with silver light and the soft hum of alien machines. His body ached, but the pain reminded him he was alive. He blinked slowly, trying to remember where he was. The last thing he recalled was sealing the hatch and flames surrounding him. Now he lay on a soft bed in the Karath medbay, surrounded by strange technology and glowing patterns dancing across the walls. When he turned his head, he saw Sarai, the High Mother, sitting near his bed. Her golden eyes were calm, watching him with quiet relief. "You live," she said softly. Ethan's lips curved into a weak smile. "I wasn't sure I would." "You were close to death," she replied. "But you fought it, just as you fought to save us." He looked at her for a long moment. "Is everyone safe?" "Yes," Sarai said, her tone warm. "The mothers, the children. Because of you, they all survived." Ethan closed his eyes, relief washing over him like cool rain. "Then it was worth it." But Sarai's expression darkened slightly. She looked away, her silver markings dimming. "The others do not all see it that way," Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "The law you broke," she whispered. "The Chamber of Mothers is sacred. Even saving us cannot erase that. The council has called for judgment." Ethan's chest tightened. "A trial?" She nodded. "At dawn." The next morning, the great hall of the Oathbound was filled with silence. Dozens of Karath stood in rows, their glowing eyes fixed on the center platform. The air was heavy with tension and old tradition. Ethan stood there, weak but upright. He wore a simple medical suit, his left arm still wrapped in a support brace. His heart pounded, but he faced them without fear. Captain Varen stood beside the High Council. His voice echoed through the hall. "Ethan Cole, human of Earth," he said solemnly. "You entered the Chamber of Mothers, an act forbidden by our oldest law. Do you deny this?" Ethan took a deep breath. "No, sir. I don't deny it," murmurs filled the hall. The Karath rarely heard such directness from a human. Varen continued. "Do you understand what that law means to us?" "I do," Ethan said quietly. "And I respected it. But that day I heard a child crying. I saw your people trapped and dying. I couldn't just stand there. Maybe I broke a law, but I couldn't break myself." His voice was soft but strong, filled with honesty. The words hung in the air like fire. Some Karath shifted uncomfortably. Others lowered their heads. From the side, Sarai stepped forward. The High Mother's presence silenced the room instantly. She stood tall and radiant, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "This human speaks truth," she said. "When death came for us, he did not hesitate. He entered our sacred space not out of pride, but out of mercy. He saved our lives, and the lives of our children." She looked around the hall, her glowing eyes fierce. "Tell me, my brothers, what honor is greater than saving life?" A long silence followed. The council whispered among themselves. One of the elders, his voice deep and cold, replied, "Tradition holds the chamber pure. If we allow one to break it, we weaken its holiness." Sarai turned toward him. "And what is holiness without compassion?" Her question struck the hall like thunder. Even Captain Varen looked shaken. He studied Ethan quietly, his eyes full of thought. Finally, Varen stepped down from the dais. He stood in front of Ethan, looking him straight in the eyes. "You risked everything to protect what you did not understand," he said. "You acted against our laws, but your reasons were pure." Ethan swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to be a hero, I just couldn't let anyone die." Varen's gaze softened. He turned to the council. "I ask this court, should we punish the man who saved our future or thank him for reminding us what honor truly means?" The hall was silent for several long moments. Then Sarai stepped beside Ethan, placing her hand over her heart. Slowly, others followed. One by one, the alien women who had survived that day appeared from the back of the hall, each carrying their glowing children. They stood before the council and bowed deeply toward Ethan. It was the highest gesture of gratitude among the Karath. The council could no longer speak. Finally, the oldest elder rose. His voice trembled slightly. "Let it be written," he declared, "that Ethan Cole, human of Earth, is forgiven. Let it be known that he entered the sacred chamber not as a trespasser but as a protector. A soft wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Shock, then respect, then applause. The alien lights on the walls glowed brighter, echoing the emotion that filled the room. Ethan stood quietly, his heart full. He wasn't used to praise. He had only done what felt right. But now, seeing those he saved standing alive before him, he realized the weight of what he had done. Sarai looked at him and smiled faintly. "You changed us, human," she said. "You showed us courage without pride, sacrifice without demand." Ethan smiled back. "Maybe sometimes rules need a little breaking, to remind us what they were made for." Sarai's laughter was soft, like the wind through crystal. And as the hall filled with light and peace, Ethan Cole, once the outsider, once the rule breaker, became something that Karath had never seen before. A hero. Days passed after the trial, and the ship Oathbound slowly returned to life. The damaged sections were sealed, the engines repaired, and the cries of newborns once again echoed softly in the sanctum. But something had changed, something deep and quiet within the hearts of the Karath. They now looked at Ethan differently. Before, he had been the outsider, the fragile human among the shining giants. They had watched him with silent judgment, measuring his every step. But after what he did, the same eyes that once held distance now held respect. Wherever he walked, the crew bowed their heads slightly, a gesture of honor. Some greeted him in broken English, trying to show kindness the way he had shown it to them. For the first time, Ethan felt like he wasn't just a guest. He belonged, still he found it strange. He had never wanted fame or recognition. All he wanted was peace, a quiet moment where life could breathe again. But peace on a ship full of Karath was never simple. One morning, Captain Varen called him to the observation deck. The stars outside shimmered like rivers of light, reflecting in the captain's silver eyes. "You have changed my crew," Varen said quietly. Ethan smiled a little. "I didn't mean to, I just did what anyone should have done." Varen shook his head. "No, many would have followed orders. Few would have followed their hearts." He paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "The Council on Karath Prime has heard of your act. They call it the Human's Grace. They wish to see you when we return." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Me, why?" "To learn," Varen replied. "They wish to understand what drove you to break our oldest law, and why mercy mattered more than obedience." Ethan laughed softly. "Guess I'm going to have a hard time explaining that." Varen's lips curved into what might have been a faint smile. "You will find the words. You already did when you saved us." Later that day, Sarai invited Ethan to the sanctum. For the first time, the door opened not with fear but with welcome. He stepped inside slowly, remembering the day he first entered it. Fire, smoke, fear, and desperation. But now the air was calm, glowing with gentle blue light. The mothers were there, their faces peaceful. The children played quietly, their tiny bodies glowing like stars in motion. When Sarai saw him, she smiled. "Welcome, Ethan Cole," she said warmly. "You may enter freely now." Ethan looked around in awe. The chamber was beautiful beyond words. Walls alive with light, the floor soft like glass that breathed. "It's amazing," he whispered. Sarai nodded. "This place was always meant to be sacred. But you reminded us why it should be sacred. Not because it is hidden, but because it gives life. You taught us that compassion makes holiness stronger, not weaker." Ethan's eyes softened. "I didn't teach you. You already knew it. You just forgot." Sarai smiled gently, her golden eyes shining brighter. She led him to the center of the room, where the injured mother he had saved sat with her child. The child's glow had grown stronger now, full of energy and light. When the baby saw Ethan, it reached out toward him with tiny hands. He crouched down, smiling softly. The mother said something in her language, then pressed her palm against his chest. Sarai translated. "She says you are part of her child's life now. In Karath tradition, that means you are family." Ethan froze for a moment, emotion tightening his throat. He looked at the child, then at Sarai. "Family?" "Yes," Sarai said. "Not by blood, but by act." A quiet warmth filled his chest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since leaving Earth. Belonging. As days turned into weeks, word of Ethan's deed spread beyond the Oathbound. Other Karath ships sent messages of respect. Some humans on distant colonies even heard of the story. The human who entered the chamber. It became a tale of courage told across both species. Meetings between human diplomats and Karath leaders became warmer, more open. Where there had once been suspicion, there was now curiosity. Where there had been distance, there was hope. And in the quiet of space, Ethan often stood by the observation window, watching the stars drift by. He thought about how strange fate was, how one moment of choice could change the hearts of an entire species. Sarai often joined him there, standing beside him in silence. One evening, as the stars painted her face in silver light, she said softly, "Our children will grow hearing your story. They will know that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can shake the oldest law." Ethan smiled gently. If that's true, then maybe this universe still has hope. She looked at him, her golden eyes kind. "You gave it to us." They stood together, two beings from different worlds, gazing into the same stars. And in that quiet moment, the distance between their species faded. Not through power or war, but through one man's simple choice to care. But the story wasn't over yet. Far away on Karath Prime, powerful voices were already arguing about what Ethan's act meant for their ancient traditions. Some wanted to honor him. Others wanted to silence the change he had begun. And Ethan, unknowingly, had become more than a man. He had become the spark of a new future. Months later, the ship Oathbound finally reached Karath Prime, the shining capital of the alien dominion. Ethan had seen pictures before, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The planet floated in space like a jewel, its surface wrapped in glowing clouds, its cities built from living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. When he stepped off the ship, the air was warm and carried a strange, sweet scent. Thousands of Karath gathered in silence, their glowing markings shimmering like waves under moonlight. Ethan felt small among them, but not afraid. He had faced worse. Captain Varen walked beside him, his tall figure glowing faintly under the twin suns. "Do not speak until they ask," he whispered. "And whatever happens, know that your name has already reached their hearts." Ethan nodded. "I'm not here to fight anyone." Varen gave a faint smile. "That is why they listen." The council hall was enormous, a dome of light that stretched high above, filled with echoes of ancient songs. 13 elders sat in a circle, their robes flowing like liquid silver. In the center stood Ethan, a single human surrounded by an entire civilization's gaze. An elder rose to speak, her voice calm but powerful. "Human Ethan Cole," she began, "you broke the oldest law of our kind. No male, especially not one from another world, has ever stepped into the chamber of mothers. Yet you did. You touched our sacred air, saw our life-givers, and lived to tell it. Tell us why." Ethan stood still for a moment, his hands trembling slightly. He looked up at the glowing figures and took a slow breath. "I didn't mean to disrespect your law," he said quietly. "I only wanted to help. There was a breach. People were trapped, mothers, children. I heard a baby crying. I couldn't walk away. Not then, not ever." The hall was silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Ethan continued, his voice steady but full of feeling. "On Earth we have a saying, if you can save someone, you do it. Doesn't matter who they are. That's all I did. I didn't think about rules. I just saw lives that needed saving. Maybe I'm just a foolish human who cares too much, but I'd rather be that than someone who turns away." For a long time, no one spoke. The elders exchanged looks, some thoughtful, some unsure. Then the same elder who had questioned him stepped closer. "You broke our rule," she said slowly, "and yet because of you, life was preserved. The sanctity of the chamber remains, and your act has shown our people something. Forgotten, compassion." Ethan swallowed. "I didn't do it for praise. I just did what I thought was right." The elder nodded, her glowing eyes softening. "That is why it matters." The decision of the council spread across the planet like fire. The humans in Karath would now share knowledge, culture, and understanding. The ancient law about the women's chamber was rewritten, not erased, but reborn. It now said, "All who protect life, regardless of form or world, are worthy to stand within." Ethan didn't fully understand the weight of it until later. His one act had changed how two species saw each other. When he returned to the Oathbound, the crew gathered around him. Sarai stood at the front, holding the glowing infant he had once saved. "You have done more than save a child," she said softly. "You saved us from our own walls." Ethan smiled gently, his voice low. "I didn't do it alone. You all believed after I did. That's what made it real. Sarai stepped closer, placing the baby in his arms. The child laughed, small hands glowing against his chest. "He knows you," she whispered. "He feels the one who gave him life." Ethan looked down, eyes misty. "I guess we both needed saving." As the ship left Karath Prime, the stars stretched before them like endless rivers of light. Ethan stood by the window, watching their glow. He thought of Earth, of home, of how far he had come. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a mechanic or a guest on a strange ship. He was a bridge between two worlds that had once feared each other. Captain Varen joined him, arms folded behind his back. "Do you ever regret entering the chamber?" Ethan smiled faintly. "No, if I hadn't, I'd still be wondering what would have happened if I had." Varen nodded slowly. "Sometimes one heart can change an entire species. You have reminded us that strength does not come from power, but from mercy." Ethan looked out at the stars again. Maybe that's what it means to be human. And for the first time in a long while, he felt peace, not the quiet of emptiness, but the kind that comes from knowing you did something that mattered. The stars shimmered like distant candles, and the hum of the ship became a lullaby of hope. Somewhere in the chamber below, the alien child laughed again, half Karath, half human in spirit. And Ethan Cole, the man who broke a sacred law to save a life, smiled to himself, because sometimes being human wasn't about following rules. It was about breaking them for the right reason.